Je déclare cette
Welcome. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 106 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. I will start with a few reminders. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. Just so you are aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. And of course, colleagues, friends, screenshots, or taking photos of your screen is not permitted.
conformant à l'article
Pursuant to Standing Order 81-4, the committee commenced consideration of the main estimates 2024-25. Vote 1 under Canadian Dairy Commission, vote 1 under Canadian Grain Commission, and votes 1, 5, and 10 under Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food. I would now like to welcome the Honourable Lawrence Macaulay, the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food. And of course, we are maritime colleagues. On behalf of the committee, thank you for the work that you do for our Canadian farmers and for all producers across the country. Welcome to the committee. You have a few minutes, I believe 5 minutes, and maybe a little touch more for your opening remarks. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's wonderful to be back here. It truly is, and I understand you've been busy over the last few months. So I want to begin by thanking you for all the work that you've done on behalf of farmers, ranchers, and processors right across this country. I've also had a busy few months, so I'd like to provide a short update on what's going on in Agriculture Canada. On the international stage, we continue to help our producers and processors to maximize their opportunities in the global marketplace. Last year, Canada's agriculture and food exports reached a record very close to $100 billion. I know you're all fully aware that I was in the Indo-Pacific back in February to open a new agriculture and agri-food office in Manila. This office will be vital in helping our farmers grow their markets. And let the region know that Canada is there and we're there to stay. Over the last few months, I've also been in Washington to meet with Secretary Vilsack about Canada's agricultural priorities and was in Boston to help promote our world-class seafood products at the Boston Seafood Show. I can tell you that our customers there are looking for more of our world-class Canadian agri-food products. And next week I will be visiting Iowa and Minnesota to meet with key officials and stakeholders there. Since we last met, I've made significant funding announcements for the sector. In January, I joined your committee colleague, Mr. Lewis, to announce $10 million in Phase 5 of the Local Food Infrastructure Fund, which will support 192 projects. This program is doing an incredible job of strengthening our communities right across the country, which I was so pleased to see it received an additional $62.9 million in Budget 2024 to renew and expand the program. In March, we announced a $177 million extension of the wine sector support program to support our world-class wine industry. Shortly after that, we announced the latest stream of agricultural clean technology programs, which included $97 million to support 162 projects across Canada that will keep farmers on the cutting edge with clean technology. Our producers have also faced major challenges with high input prices and interest rates, which impact their cash flow. As farming operating costs remain unclear this year, farmers have asked us to continue support under the Advance Payment Program, and we have delivered by raising the interest-free limit to the Advance Payment Program to $250,000 for 2024. We will also work with industry partners such as the Canadian Cattle Association to make sure that the livestock tax deferral delivers more quickly and more efficiently for producers in time of need. Lastly, Mr. Chair, I'd like to update you on the Department's main estimates for 2024-2025. The estimates you have before you total some $3.7 billion. This includes over $2 billion to support our programs under the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, over $500 million to continue our support of the hardworking dairy, poultry, and eggs producers under the supply management system, $250 million to the Canadian Climate Solution and Agricultural Clean Technology programs to give our farmers the tools they need to produce the most sustainable food in the planet. Mr. Chair, while these are tremendous opportunities in the agricultural sector, we know folks are facing significant challenges. We will keep working together to help our farmers put money in the pockets of farmers and make sure that the farmers are able to feed Canadians and the world. Thank you very much, and very pleased to attempt to answer your questions.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, for your opening remarks. I had forgotten to introduce the other witnesses at the beginning of our meeting. So first, Stephanie Beck, Deputy Minister. Welcome. Marie-Claude Guérard, Assistant Deputy Minister, Corporate Management Branch, who is online. Tom Rosser, Assistant Deputy Minister, Market and Industry Services Branch, also online. Mr. Rosser, you are very well known by all the members of this committee. With the CFIA, Robert Yaniro, Vice President, Policy and Programs, and Stanley Hsu, Vice President, Corporate Management and Chief Financial Officer. So welcome to our committee, and thank you for all of the work you do on behalf of our farmers. So the question period will begin. I believe Mr. Barlow will begin with 6 minutes.
And thank you, Minister, for being here today. I wanted to start the questions with the Auditor General's report that came out earlier this month. And the report from the Commissioner of Environment and Sustainable Development had a pretty scathing report on agriculture specifically. And it stated that, Minister, you implemented agriculture programs and policies without proper consultation, incomplete measurements, and without any really clear plan or strategy. In fact, the report shows that you've achieved less than 2% of your 2030 overall greenhouse gas emissions targets. Now, you've repeatedly said that farmers support the carbon tax, but you voted against Bill C-234. You voted in favor of a carbon tax carve-out for home heating in Atlantic Canada, but not for farmers. And you've also voted in favor of quadrupling the carbon tax. Can you tell me, as a result of that report, what will be the emissions reductions from agriculture specifically when the carbon tax is quadrupled? What will be the emissions reductions? Has agriculture done that work?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chair, and I appreciate my honourable colleague's question and certainly appreciate the Commissioner's report and, of course, agree with the recommendations. There's no question that we need to do more in agriculture to reduce emissions, which we have invested $1.5 billion to help farmers innovate and reduce emissions. While we're actually under the development stage and sustainable agricultural strategy that will share a vision for the sector's ambition over the next number of years. In fact, we're putting a sustainable agricultural strategy together, working with what we're trying to do is make sure we involve the agricultural sector, and that's what we want to do. And when we put the strategy together, we want to make sure that we continue to...
Are you measuring those reductions? Are you measuring the emissions reductions in agriculture specifically? And if so, what is the number? And if not, why not?
Mr. Speaker, of course, we are continuing to reduce emissions in this country, as my honourable colleague is fully aware, and we will continue to put programs in place in order to make sure that we do reduce emissions. And I can assure my honourable colleague that farmers in this country and ranchers in this country fully understand how important it is that reduce emissions. We are reducing emissions and will continue to reduce emissions because we understand the problems of climate change, and if we do not address them, that puts massive costs into the farmers. I've seen the results of it right across the country, and Minister, it is massive. And we will continue to invest to make sure farmers are going to be able to make changes to reduce their emissions.
So you're not measuring those results, and in fact, your emissions have gone up, not down. But the fact is, you're not measuring those emissions. You're clearly saying that, but. So you don't know the number of the emissions that will be reduced. You don't know the impact on farmers, but the Parliamentary Budget Office was very clear that the reduction in emissions in agriculture will be negligible as a result of the carbon tax going up, and yet the cost to farmers is going to be close to $1 billion in 2030 when you quadruple the carbon tax. So the Parliamentary Budget Officer knows those answers, but for some reason you don't want to share them. But another one, it is my understanding that Government of Canada and Agriculture Canada has started to repay the money that it took from farmers for the fertilizer tariff, and in fact gave Solio $7.5 million to start repaying back farmers. It started redistributing that money, but then the Government of Canada came back and asked for the $7.5 million back. Is the financial picture of the Liberal government so bleak that you're having to take money out of the pockets of farmers yet again by asking for the $7.5 million that you owe farmers back again?
Thank you very much. I want to thank my honourable colleague, Mr. Chair, for the question, and of course it's a very important issue, and without any question I'm always on the side of farmers, and what we have to, there is a bit of a mix-up, and it's been evaluated at the time, and we want to make sure that, of course, the reductions, we know what we're dealing with the Ukraine war and the Russian fertilizer. Of course, I will work closely with the farmers in order to establish just what measures can be taken to be sure that they're properly refunded.
The war in Ukraine doesn't have anything to do with your department taking the money back after you gave it back to farmers and have now asked for a $7.5 million check back. It's embarrassing. But to the point with the Auditor General saying that Agriculture Canada has not been doing its job, I'm hoping that you have an answer for this one. Have you done any assessment on the financial implications of the capital gains inclusion change? What's that going to have? What impact is that going to have on the financial viability of farmers? Have you done that work? Have you done a consultation assessment before it was announced in the budget?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate my honourable colleague's question. And of course, all farm property is eligible for the newly increased $1.25 million lifetime capital gains tax exemption and deferral taxes when transferring a farm to a spouse or a child also will remain in place. Just to make sure, what we've done over the last period of time is to work hard to make sure, as we're all aware, it's a major issue to shift large firms, or any type of farm, in families.
Before
and what we want to do is to make sure that we're making it easier for farm families to be able to transfer their property so that they'll be able to continue in the agricultural sector. I know my honourable colleague is fully convinced and cares a lot that we're able to make sure that the young generation is able to take over without a lot of financial burden, and we will continue to work on that.
Thank you, Minister McCauley. Thank you, Mr. Barlow. I'll remind this committee and indeed all Canadians that the exemption on home heating oil applies across the country, not just Atlantic Canada. As one of the architects involved in that, I made sure it applies across the country. So just to make sure the record is very clear. Right now, we'll turn to Mr. McDonald for up to 6 minutes. Over to you, my friend.
Thank you. Welcome, Minister. Minister, I had the opportunity recently to talk to several players in the beef industry, and Maritime Beef was on the Hill here just recently. I met up with Nathan Finney not that long ago, and I heard the same comments last summer at the Canadian Cattlemen's Association meeting in Calgary. And it was all regarding livestock price insurance. And this is something that has been kind of brought up the last couple of years as well, and I know you weren't in that chair that long, but it's something that I think we need to, as a government, to look at. And you know, they're concerned about climate change, and they're concerned about droughts, which we're seeing. They're concerned about floods, wildfires, etc. And, you know, it's a driving factor on why it should be a permanent BRM program. So is there any possibility, or would the AAFC consider this request from beef producers? And maybe if they are we in that process, or is it a possibility at all, or is it something that we're looking at?
Thank you very much. I appreciate your question, and as you're fully aware, I've been around for a while, and this question has been around for quite a while, even more than 2 years, and it's a program that was pretty much copied from Western Canada to make sure it gives the Eastern Canadian beef producers a chance to give them more stability. And of course, yes, they're going through and fully understand they're going through the climate change issues and the destruction that takes place. And even without that, with that it's very difficult, but even without that you always have fluctuation in prices, and that makes it very difficult for no matter what sector you're in agriculture. But the beef producers have been discussing and working together with each province in the eastern part of the country in order to put a program together with the Government of Canada. And all I can tell you is progress is proceeding very well, and I don't think probably I should say any more because I don't want to preempt any announcement that I shouldn't preempt, but I can tell you it's on a good path, and that's exactly where we want it, and I'm sure everybody around this table wants it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I'm going to move on to something that is close to you and I, potato wort. The draft National Potato Wort Response Plan modifies the scheduling of C&D fields and creates a more viable and streamlined path to restarting production in fields that carry a low risk of wort. Can you expand on these changes, how they were decided upon, and what benefits they will provide growers on the international stage?
Well, thank you very much. And of course, the international stage is what played a big part in this major potato issue. And I was not Minister of Agriculture when that hit, and I can assure you I know I got an immense amount of calls on the issue. And of course, considering that we're such a large potato growers in the eastern part of the country, I believe close to, if not the largest producer in the country, and it's a massive income for Prince Edward Island. And there was great difficulty, I will certainly agree with, over the last couple of years. But as you know, we're putting a potato wort consultation program in place in order to make sure, as you know, it's been announced, and what we want to make sure is that, as I said before, with the Sustainable Agricultural Strategy, that the growers in Prince Edward Island are fully involved, the Potato Marketing Board is fully involved, the exporters are fully involved. So this all working together, but of course there are rules that we have to follow. The biggest, we do not want to do anything that would cause jeopardy on the export side, because we export 95% of what we produce, and we have to make sure that border does not close. And it causes nothing but havoc. I've seen it closed a number of times, and it creates great difficulty. But I think where we are at the moment is a good place. At the last budget, we announced $12 million to further advance these studies and to make sure we're able to continue to the progress down the line. As you know, there was soil testing that took place during the last harvest season. Caused some concern, but then when growers understand that our biggest trading partner was wanting this to happen, you have to pretty well, I agree that the buyer, if he signs the check, should have some say in it, and it worked out pretty well, but without not a mystery again for the farmers and potato growers, particularly in Prince Edward Island. It was a great difficulty.
Thank you. That's fine. Thank you. Is that what you said? 30 seconds?
No, you have 1 minute.
Oh,
Mr.
I'm sorry.
McDowell.
All right, thank you. You know, some of our colleagues sitting at this table and myself were in Washington and talking to congressmen on agriculture and issues around agriculture. Last week we had the parliamentarians from Germany, which is a part of the EU. And one of the questions I posed to the contingent from Germany was about their cross-border tariffs and what relationship that is to farming and what they're considering. And the response I got was kind of interesting, because they went right to right to basically dairy and supply management and used the term protectionism. And so I found that rather interesting, and I'm just wondering, what is the department hearing on the cross-border tariffs? And if you don't have time to answer it, we can come back to it at my next round.
So we are at time, but Minister, I'll give you about around 30 seconds.
Well, of course, supply management can always be an issue. It works very well in this country, as we're all aware. But of course, not having, and I understand this, what you're talking about, cross-border tariffs, if you don't have a program in place to deal with the environment and you want to export, you're going to be in trouble. Quite simply, importing nations will have great difficulty with a country that does not have a climate change plan in place. And when I was in Manila, I met importers from Manila, and one of the first questions they asked me, what's your green footprint and what's your environmental plan? Quite simply, if you don't have one, you won't be doing much business here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Mr. McDonald. Maintenant, Monsieur Parent pour 6 minutes. Allez-y, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
On to Mr. Perron for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the Minister and all the witnesses for being here today. I have many questions, so I'd appreciate very brief responses. First, I'm going to talk to you about Agri-Recovery. The government of Quebec asked for it in November, and it still has not been launched. Do you have any dates to give us? Is there any hope that you can give to the farmers and producers?
Yeah, Mr. Perron. I have no date. And I think we've discussed this a number of times. And first of all, I appreciate your concern. Also, I must say I appreciate your input, because you did bring farmers to this up to Ottawa, and I think everybody involved in these issues is so vitally important. And you just simply make the situation easier when you do that. The fact is, with this program, as you're fully aware, it's a federal provincial program, and it's the province and the government of Canada together. Province provides the information, and then the government of Canada
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre. Je m'excuse de vous interrompre.
provides that.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I know about that.
But everything has to be done efficiently, or I'd get a little touch-up at this table probably if I didn't. So we have to do it right. But I also fully understand how vitally important it is to get the money in the farmers' hands as quickly as possible, because they need it. Thank you.
OK. Parce que vous parlez là d'une augmentation des exportations.
You say that there's been an increase of exports and of farming revenue and of sales, but net revenue has been 86% reduction. This has never happened, and it's a very dire situation. A program like Agri-Recovery, which is, an emergency program, should not take 18 months to implement. That means that it's too slow. We have to be we have to do an overhaul of these risk management programs. There are the witnesses that talked to us about issues in the horticulture industry told us there are issues with the programs. A year ago, they made certain requests, and there is no response from the federal government. Are you working on this? Do you have anything to tell us this morning? And will you start overhauling these programs of management, agricultural management? We can't wait. Agri-stability is it takes in consideration, on average, the last 5 years, but we can't do that. It doesn't work anymore. We have to overhaul this quickly.
First of all, I agree with you that it's too long, my honourable colleague. And the fact is, of course, it is a federal provincial program. The province puts the information together and we evaluate it. We both have criteria to follow. We have to continue to do that. But I would also say, as you're aware, we will be having a meeting with, I expect to meet your minister, Mr. Lamantang, who I must say has been very good to work with. But we want to get the checks out, and I'm sure he does as quickly as possible. But we will be meeting in the Yukon in July. And of course, the business risk management programs will be on the table, I am sure. And if there's a way that we can coordinate it and put together fast do we want to do that. And in fact, we are making a change or looking to make, or will make a change in tax deferral. That, of course, is an issue for the beef farmers to make sure that it just took too long, and we're starting the evaluation earlier just to make sure. Quite honestly, what we're trying to do is to make sure that we get the checks in the pockets of the qualified farmers and ranchers as quickly as possible. And we will continue to do that.
C'est bon. Merci beaucoup. Donc, je vais mettre beaucoup d'espoir.
Thank you very much. So I will put all my hopes on that meeting in July, but that's still very far. The losses incurred have already been incurred from last year. You talked about bringing in farming products. You said that the farmers had to sell cattle because they didn't have enough hay to feed them. So they have a different kind of additional revenue. So we have to think outside the box. With regards to agricultural financing, I have a few farmers who said that they had 18% interest on late loans. I asked the question to the representative, and they said that must have been exceptional. But since I've had other farmers bring up this issue, I ask you this question since you are the minister. Do you think that maybe you should look into this? Is agricultural financing not far away from its mission if they are charging interest rates that are equivalent of that of a credit card?
First of all, I fully believe we're thinking out of the box on the issues that we need to move fast on. On this 18% loan issue, of course, it's through Farm Credit Canada, and individual loans, of course, I have no input into. I could speculate what might happen with individuals and their loans, but to answer the question as to why an interest rate is put at a certain rate by a financial institution, I cannot. But I can tell you whatever I can find out, which I just found this out yesterday from you. And I've never been involved in individual, and I won't be either, but I'll find out what the structure is in order to them allowed to be able to put 18% or have decided to put 18% on a loan. I can assure you, back many years ago, being a farmer myself and seeing an interest rate at 22%, I know what that does. That hurts.
Thank you, Minister. Thanks,
Thank you.
Mr. Perron. To the NDP, Mr. McGregor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for joining us today, Minister. Last year, I traveled to Penticton, right in the heart of the Okanagan in British Columbia, to be a part of the Organic BC conference. And it was really fantastic being in a room of organic farmers who, in many cases, are really pushing the envelope in the ways they're trying to farm, the ways they're trying to, make it economically, great sharing of ideas. Since then, I've talked a lot with the Canadian Organic Trade Association, who's really been trying to echo a lot of what they're trying to achieve on the ground. And in particular, one current theme keeps on coming up. It's a lack of a policy framework that we have for organic food and farming, because this is in contrast to some of our major trade competitors who have organic growth policies. They're making historic investments in the sectors. And the concern here amongst organic farmers in Canada is that if we don't match that kind of investment and that kind of commitment, we're going to be left behind, which would be a real shame given the real potential that the sector has and the growth it's already seen. So to you, Minister, what are your thoughts on recognizing and incorporating organic agriculture into a sustainable agriculture strategy? That's a real call from the sector. And I'd like to hear, I think they would like to hear from you today on what you're prepared to do in the future on that.
Well, of course, Alistair, thank you very much for the question. And I have to say thank you to your support. And when you have issues, you bring them forth and you want them resolved. And I thank you for that. It just makes it easier. Of course, they're involved in sustainable agricultural strategy, and we want to be sure that they're involved, understanding quite well how big the organic market is. I don't excuse me, I don't have the figures right before me, but we export a lot of organic product and we import substantial amount of organic products. So the opening is there to produce more organic products. I know when I was minister before, the organic standards was a big issue and the big problem of getting the funding. And we were able to, with a lot of help from a lot of people, we were able to arrange that and cover. But the standards, are, as you know, are vitally important too. We want to make sure that they expand, yes.
What I want to know, I think what they want to know is about the development of a policy framework. I understand like the standards and we know about the funding that is being provided, but what about a policy framework? That's what the sector is really driving at.
Well, Alistair, they are involved in the sustainable agricultural strategy, and of course I want to help them with any framework they can put in place because, as you know, we export close to $100 billion worth of agriculture and agri-food products, and they are a major part of it. Anything that we can do in order to, if it's a special framework or whatever, to put them, to help them, I want to do it because the market is fully there, and I'm sure the government wants to do it and Canadians want it because Canadians want the product, and we will make sure that we will work in every way possible to, because organic farming is expanding and expanding. Thank you.
Get to another question. As you know, the chicken farmers of Canada were recently in town, and again, a reoccurring theme is the very real concerns with spent fowl making its way across the border. They keep on bringing up the fact that there's an available DNA test. The concern that the amounts coming into Canada are really making a mockery of TRQs. And I think they just want to know from you, Minister, like how seriously are you taking this issue? What can you tell this committee about how you're working with some of our partners at CBSA? The chicken farmers don't seem to be giving you a passing grade on that front based on what I heard directly from them.
Alistair, I appreciate again your question. I just met them about a half an hour ago, and they were pretty polite, really, to tell you the truth. But they were not, of course, this is an issue, and it's an ongoing issue. And in fact, just a couple of days ago, I was with a meeting, and nobody could think of what the problem was. And I knew about spent fowl, I can tell you, being here previously and knowing the problem. But the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, of course, is working with their counterparts in the U.S. and the border service areas in order. I do know that there was a suggestion put forth by the chicken farmers, but I can't dictate to Canadian Food Inspection Agency what, or border service agencies what they will accept or will not accept. But I have to say that the subject you're on is absolutely right because the American chicken farmers and the Canadian chicken farmers are working, but it has declined.
And that's a great segue. Did this come up in your conversations with Secretary Vilsack? Like how high of a priority was this when you were discussing it? Because obviously they're pointing the fingers to one source. It's the United States.
Well, of course, it's. I shouldn't be accepting a problem myself, but the fact is, it's not Vilsack's problem. I don't think it's been imported into the U.S., but it's coming into Canada.
Yeah.
And, of course, they are concerned, but it's up to our government and our agencies and our system to come up in some way to deal with this. We did some testing, some kind of, and I'm not a scientist, but there was testing done during my sabbatical as minister, and they tell me that the reductions went down, but they're starting to creep up again, so we have to take more action, and I fully agree with that.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre et Monsieur McGregor. Maintenant, nous
Thank you, Mr. Minister and Mr. McGregor. Now on to Mr. Steinley for 6 minutes.
And Mr. Minister, there are storm clouds on the horizon in agriculture, but it has nothing to do with climate change. On behalf of 190,000 farm families, the Minister of Finance just got a letter when it comes to the increase in capital gains exemption from 1/2 to 2/3. Was there any consultation with the agriculture sector before this was put into Budget 2024?
Thank you very much. I appreciate your question. I truly do. And I can't answer for the Minister of Finance, but I think she was traveling right across the country to have discussions with all sectors in this country. But
thank you, Mr. Minister. But did your department have any consultations with agriculture sector stakeholders before this was put into Budget 2024? Is it a yes or a no?
not very keen on this yes or no stuff, but the thing is, did I know what was going in the budget before it went in the budget? No.
Well, you didn't know. You yourself, Minister, did not know this was going to be in budget
I do
2024.
not write the budget.
Okay, thank you very much. That's interesting. You did speak of the younger generation, and I was met with the 4-H youth, so that was fantastic. And I was wondering, do you know how much third-party consultant fees have increased in your department since 2015? The increase in the cost of third-party consultants.
Well, of course, again, a very important question, and I'm quite sure that we use outsourced consultants, but being a departmental issue, I would have to ask my capable deputy to respond to that. If she can.
On for you, Mr. Minister, in the Department of Agriculture, the third-party consultant fees have increased by 95% since 2015. Do you know how many employees, what the employee count has increased as well in the Department of Agriculture?
I don't have the exact figures with me, no.
Would your deputy know by chance?
The increase in employment.
And I don't have the exact number either, but it would be in the hundreds.
So, third-party consulting has increased by 95%, and your employee FTE count has increased by hundreds, you said. So, do you think farm families are gaining value for that?
What I can tell you, my good friend, is that my job as Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food, and I've been in and out of agriculture, mostly in it since the government was formed. Back in 2016, we expected to have $74 billion worth of exports from this country by 2025. We have now just under $100 billion of agriculture and agri-food exports from this country. And it takes what we have to make sure that we have the people in place in order to make sure the agricultural sector has the support they need in order to continue to supply the sustainable food that they have. And that is vitally important because...
I appreciate that. Thank you
but
very much.
I need to tell you, sir, too, that if we do not have sustainable food, we do not export. And
I agree with our agriculture is a world-class product. I just ask these questions because there's been an increase in spending in various areas, but you have also seen cuts in your department. For example, the Foundation Science and Research was cut by $1.3 million in your budget. And also, when I met with the 4-H youth, your department, sir, has cut funding for 4-H for the next generation. And when I met with their team when they were engaging on citizen engagement on the Hill, they're quite concerned that might be one of the programs that gets cut. So my question is, you could not find any savings when it came to third-party consultants, but you cut funding that is going to produce the next generation of farmers in our country. How do you explain that?
Of course, I have a number of programs have changed, and I think you're referring to 4-H and other programs. And of course, I was a 4-H member, and probably the first program I ever entered that allowed me to learn public speaking and other ways of life. Just a very valuable program. All these programs are vitally important. I can assure you, my good friend, that I'll do everything to make sure these programs, the youth programs, Ag in the Classroom, all of these do so much in order to encourage people to understand exactly what the agricultural sector is all about.
So
we
can
need
you
the
restore this
farmers,
funding
but we
to
also
4-H?
need people involved in the agricultural sector. And I will continue to work to make sure that they are there.
Will you be able to
We're at
restore
time,
funding
Mr.
to 4-H?
Steinley. Mr. Steinley, we're at time, but I will allow, the minister was trying to reference the deputy minister for a query that you had raised that you have since, I guess, given this committee. But if deputy minister, as the chair, if you have anything you might want to add, I'll give it to you. And if not, because you didn't have that opportunity.
We might get into it a little bit later, but of course there have been adjustments to programs all across the board, in particular for internal services and third-party consultants.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn to Ms. Taylor-Roy for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Minister McCauley and your colleagues for being here today to answer questions about the main estimates. As you know, I'm a great supporter of agriculture and agri-foods initiatives in the plant-based protein sector. And I noticed that there's been an additional funding now of over $11 million to Pulse Canada under the Agri-Science program. And I think that reflects our government's continued commitment to the development of plant-based proteins in Canada. And I was looking at, I'm sure, as you know, the potential for Canadian farmers and for this industry is $25 billion going forward. It's a huge sector for us. And I believe that it gives us a way to grow our incredible agricultural sector, create wealth, but also lessen the impact of emissions on global food systems and help secure our food chain, bring more processing, more manufacturing back home. So I was just wondering if you could comment a little bit on what you think the expected economic impacts of the investment on the pulse sector will have, and on that and on Canada's position as a leading pulse exporter as well.
Thank you very much, my good friend, and I can certainly appreciate your question and how important all what your plant-based agriculture, all of that is a protein, plant-based protein is so vitally important, a big export commodity, and of course we will continue to work on that. And on the pulse side of issues, as you're fully aware, and very much appreciate your input on this issue because it's so vitally important. We exported nearly 2 million tons of lentils valued at $2.3 billion, which of course is part of close to $100 billion worth of, it's all part of agriculture, and it's all part of feeding the world. It's all part of sustainable food production. So yes, it is vitally important, and the money has been well spent, and we will continue. Our biggest customer is India. We will make sure to continue. We have continued to expand our production and our exports over the last number of years, and we, as I said before, we felt we'd be at, and even later than this time, we'd be at $75 billion, and we're at just about $100 billion. And we do that because of the investments that we have made as a government. You have to make investments to make sure that whatever sector, and the pulse sector is so vitally important, and such a big demand for it worldwide. I can assure you that we will continue to invest in this area, and thank you.
Thank you very much. In addition to being able to export the pulses in these crops, there's also the opportunity for us to increase agri-food manufacturing in Canada, because a lot of the goods are exported and then we import the finished products to use actually in some of the plant-based proteins. And I know, just as in the energy sector, there's a shift globally in terms of our consumption, that it's happening also in the agriculture sector with more plant-based proteins. And I'm just wondering whether Agri-Food is working with ICET at all, whether there's any discussion about investment in more manufacturing, food processing in Canada, so that we can take these crops and actually get the value added here in Canada.
I can tell you the answer to that, yes, indeed. And of course, just for a prime example, which I was so pleased about, in canola, crushing canola. A few years ago, we weren't doing that at all, and now we're doing substantially more and need to do a lot more. But no matter what sector of the agriculture you're in, they need investment in order to be able to expand, which we are doing. But I can assure you the rest of the world, or other parts of the world, are doing exactly what we're doing. So it's a continual push in order to make sure that we can feed the world with what they want. And that's why plant-based is so vitally important. That's why it's so important that we take care of the pulse industry, or help. We don't take care of it, the farmers do, but to make sure we give them the opportunity to expand and to process everything that we possibly can. I'm fully support any way we can in order to value add whatever product we have in this country, so that the money stays in this country instead of some other countries. And I'm sure other countries are doing that too, but we need to do more of that.
And we're right now in the Environment Committee doing a study on sustainable finance. And the taxonomy looks at investments from financial institutions, of course, into industries that are considered to be advancing our goals when it comes to net zero by 2030 and 2050. So I'm thinking that the investment in these kinds of facilities that obviously have a very large impact on helping us meet our environmental goals as well could be attractive for a lot of these financial institutions that are looking for these kind of investments. And I'm just wondering if...
Ms. Taylor-Roy, I apologize. I was going to let you finish that thought. I gave you an extra 30
Okay,
seconds,
thank
but
you.
I was going to let you remark, but unfortunately, I got to be fair to my other colleagues and make sure we disperse the time accordingly. Donc, avec
Okay,
cette,
well, just may I say thank you to the Minister then for your interest in this and answering the questions. Thank you, Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Taylor-Roy. Maintenant, Monsieur.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor-Roy. Now on to Mr. Perron for 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much. Mr. Minister, I'd like to talk to you about the vaccines against a certain disease called foot and mouth disease. There are 250,000 doses in this vaccine bank, and many pork producers are very worried now. There has been a request to increase the doses, but that has not yet been done. We need 30 million doses, and where are we at now?
And yes, of course, it is a concern to make sure the bank is properly equipped and have the vaccines in place, but I'd like to see if IA give you the appropriate answer.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour votre...
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your question about the vaccine bank.
Budget 2023 did provide $57.5 million over 5 years for the establishment of the vaccine bank. I want to reassure, Mr. Chair, through you, the committee that there's sufficient funds within that to establish the vaccine bank, whether or not we go into a cost-sharing agreement with the provinces or not. And we are in the process of finalizing a request for proposal. It will be imminently released. It is a very complicated vaccine. It's very technical, but we are in the process of issuing that RFP, and that will be obviously the first step to get suppliers to submit bids to establish the vaccine bank.
C'est long. C'est un peu comme tout le reste, Monsieur le Ministre. C'est long.
So it's taking a long time, just like everything else, and I think that we could be a bit more efficient. On to something else. The organic standards, we have to fight for it to be taken under the responsibility of the government. It costs farmers a lot to get that certification, but we should be paying them. The funds were taken out of agri-insurance. Do you think that's normal to have that cost? And don't you think that it should not come from the insurance funds of our producers?
Well, of course, it'd be great if we could pay for everything, but what we want to do is make sure that we have the appropriate standards in place to make sure that we have the organic farmers on a good standing, because, as I said to Alistair, there's no question about it, the demand for this product worldwide is big. In fact, I believe much bigger than we're producing, so that's wide open for our farmers too. We'll do everything we can, Mr. Perron, to make sure that these farmers have the equipment in order to proceed and expand, because we want to be sure that we do expand, because it's part of, as I said before, a big part of our economy.
Merci beaucoup, Minister Macaulay.
Thank you, Minister Macaulay, and thank you, Mr. Perron. Mr. McGregor for 2.5 minutes.
Chair. Minister, last month I was in Vancouver with a few of my colleagues, and we were at the Canadian Produce Marketing Association's AGM. They had a massive trade floor set up so that we could see, fresh fruit and vegetable growers from right across Canada and even the United States and Mexico. And we really got to see a great showcasing of the innovation and the technologies that the sector is really driving at. And certainly that sector is one that we need to celebrate. Of course, one of the big topics there was on ECCC's plastics policy. What I did hear in some of the conversations in some of the breakout rooms was that the industry acknowledges that it does need to step up to the plate. There is an acknowledgement that plastics are harmful to our environment, but I think they want to do it in a way that does not impact food security the food safety, because there aren't many viable alternatives. So I guess one of the big questions they have at this moment in time, and I'm sure they'd be willing to hear your answer right now, how are you engaging with ECCC on that policy development to ensure that their very real concerns are being met, while also trying to get to a packaging that's not as harmful as plastics?
Thank you very much, and I fully realize you fully understand the scope of the issue both ways, which is the problem. And I can tell you that my department is involved and working very hard with other sectors to come up with a recyclable plastic that would be acceptable to the environment. I don't need to go on, because quite simply we all know that the sea is full of plastics, but we also know that this beautiful fruit that you saw at the show we have to be able to sell that too, and to put it in appropriate packages. We fully understand that. Yes, there was an announcement made by Environment Canada, but as you know, it's in the courts, and I have to be a little careful what I say, but we have to make sure that we're able to have a packaging program in place that meets the requirements and not be offensive to the environment. And as you said quite clearly, the people you were talking to agrees with that too. We do too. So we're working very hard in order to make sure we resolve this issue. We have to resolve it. And we have to resolve it in a way that does not hurt the farmers that produce these products. And for that, I can assure you my eye is on that. Thank you so much, and I very much appreciate that question.
Thank you, Minister McCauley. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. So we'll go to our final round questions. Final round, colleagues. 5 minutes with the Conservatives, 5 minutes with the Liberals. So we'll turn to Ms. Rood. I think you might be splitting your time, but you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, very much for being here. Just to go a little bit further on that, one question on the plastics, Minister. Did you consult with industry about the implementation of the timeline, the deadlines for the implementation of the timeline? Because that was one thing we heard loud and clear from industry, is they were not consulted and the timelines are too quick for this implementation.
Well, of course I consulted, and I'm involved in government moves that take place. But, you know, of course, I can assure you, as I said to Alistair, we want to make sure that we put the appropriate, and I'm sure you do too. I know you care about this. And the truth is, we have to be able to come up with a package, and I'm sure our scientific experts will be able to do that. There has to be a little push, and perhaps it'll end up have to be some help. I don't know.
I think there's no doubt, Minister, that industry is trying to come up with alternatives. But as you know, we do operate on a global supply chain, and there is nothing available on a global scale yet at this time. So the timeline for implementation in this country alone, when we are a global supply chain, is the problem. So I challenge you to go back to the drawing board on that one. We all want to do better for the environment. We all, I think, in the industry want to do our best to reduce plastics as much as possible, but we do need to, we're looking at alternatives, but there is nothing available at this time on a commercial scale, global scale. Minister, you're also part of the working group on the Grocery Code of Conduct. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to efforts that are being made to have Walmart sign on to the code, and will the government legislate if Walmart does not voluntarily join the code?
Well, of course, what we've worked very hard. First of all, I want to thank you very much on your words on plastic. It's very helpful, and that's important. Thank you. The Grocery Code of Conduct, of course, we've indicated quite clearly a number of times that we want it to be industry-led, and it also has to have fairness, transparency, and some predictability. It's a very difficult.
Yeah. Minister, I just need an answer about Walmart. My time is running out. I've got about 10 seconds left.
Well, of course, I can't order Walmart to sign. And Loblaws came to the table, sat down, had a few changes or clarifications possibly made, and all of a sudden they announced that they were in agreement. Of course, they're in agreement.
Will you legislate if they don't sign?
We will. What we're trying to work very hard to do is to make sure that we have industry-led. That
Thank
will
you, Minister.
work much better for
I'll
the
give my
country.
time over to Mr. LaHue. Sorry, my time's up.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minister. The Temporary Foreign Workers Program, representatives across the centre, be it agriculture or agri-food, found out that you decided to decrease the cap from 30% to 20%. What we're hearing now is that you could reduce from 20 to 10% for the entire sector. Can you confirm or deny?
First of all, thank you very much. I appreciate the question, and I appreciate your concern. Understanding the value of temporary foreign workers, which I know you do too. There's consultations in place. I would very much appreciate that you made your voice heard in order to make sure that in any sector that responds to you, to make sure...
Monsieur le ministre, je ne veux pas être impoli, je veux juste demander de confirmer ou infirmer.
I don't want to be impolite. I'd just like you to know yes or no.
Suggestion, if you can make sure that the people that bring this issue to you, to make sure they're involved in the consultation process, because this is vitally important. Come from Prince Edward Island and seeing all the processing we do, I fully understand the value of temporary foreign workers. Thank you.
Je pourrais vous fournir les noms.
I can provide you names. There are various groups in Quebec that were not consulted. I spoke to a group yesterday. Will you widen the definition of primary agriculture to include agri-food production, processing factories? Can you, because it doesn't work without them. So can the entire processing industry be included in this sector? Because if we don't have any processing, there will be repercussions.
Yes, my friend, you produce the product, you pick the product, and the product has to be processed. I couldn't disagree with you. The fact is, I understand we can't talk to everybody in Canada that's involved in this industry, but I want to make sure that everybody around this table and anybody interested in the temporary foreign worker issue is to make sure that the consultations that are in place just make sure how vitally important it is for food security, if that is what you're hearing. And I fully expect that is what you're hearing.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And Mr. Lehoux, unfortunately, time is up. We will move on to Mr. Lewis for 5 minutes, who is online. Mr. Lewis, on to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. So I wanted to start by talking about the Local Food Infrastructure Fund, which is supporting community-led projects that improve access to safe and healthy food for food insecure populations in our communities. And that's helping local community food banks, community gardens, farmers markets. In my riding in Kitchener-Conestoga, Wilmot Family Resource Center received funding and increased their capacity to build their food hamper program and systems, and that was very much appreciated. And also appreciated was earlier this year, you visited Kitchener-Conestoga to meet with members from the Wilmot Family Resource Center. That's where you announced the new phase to the Local Food Infrastructure Fund. So can you expand to this committee on how the $20 million allocated for the food policy of Canada, how that can help address local food security challenges and the importance of our local farmers feeding our communities?
Thank you very much, Tim. And of course, I was very pleased to join you back in January. It was a very interesting trip, and to see the people at work was quite interesting. 192 projects through this Local Food and Infrastructure Fund will be funded. Of course, this program is vitally important to communities and important to the people in the communities that vitally need the products. That's exactly why I was so pleased to see the $62.9 million investment in local food infrastructure in the budget. Because it was, Tim, it was quite an example visiting your district, your riding, and the group of people that I dealt with. My heavens, they were certainly dedicated to the task, and it shows the true strength of what Canadians are all about and how much they care. That was a touching event, and if there was ever an event, and I've been at a lot of them, that shows that people care. That was one of them, and I couldn't be more pleased, really. Thank you so much, and I was so pleased to be able to make the $10 million announcement there, but to see how that is handled and how the products come in and even how farmers provide some of the products for you. Everybody tries, everybody wants to help, but that trip was an example of what Canadians are all about. Thank you, Tim.
No, I appreciate it. That's truly community building. And since I think August of 2019, the program is about $65 million for about 1,100 projects throughout Canada. So that is very much appreciated. I did want to switch and talk about the advanced payment program. That advanced payment program plays a crucial role in supporting Canadian farmers. The financial assistance provides several benefits that would help, including cash flow and flexibility. So earlier this year, the government announced that the interest-free limit on advanced payment program is set at $250,000 for the 2024 program year. So can you expand to this committee and explain why this news is important to farmers and ranchers in both in Kitchener-Conestoga and across Canada?
Being a farmer, Tim, I can fully understand how putting money in farmers' pockets in an appropriate manner to help them any way I can do it is, of course, vitally important. But the advanced payment program, being a farmer myself, having used the advanced payment program myself for a number of years, I understand fully how important that is. It means the interest-free for the period of time that you have the funding. That means so much. And sometimes it's hard to understand unless you're a farmer. But the fact of the matter is they grow the product, store the product, and they've paid all the expenses, but they have no way to recoup any of the funding. And with this, up to $250,000 can certainly help farmers because the bank has a tendency to call, even if you didn't sell your product. So you have to be able to make sure that you stay financially stable. And this is part of a program in order to make sure that we're able to keep farmers financially stable. It's a very important program.
Perfect. Well, thank you. In my final 30 seconds, maybe if you just had one more message to farmers in Canada, and thank you for your time.
Well, and first of all, I'd like to thank the farmers in Canada. Without a question, the strategy, sustainable agricultural strategy we're putting together it will work so well when we get around to putting it together, but it's a big project and it's a big program involving. What I like so much about this is that all sectors of is involved. Farmers themselves, the processors, the manufacturers, the retailer, everybody is involved in putting this sustainable agricultural strategy together. And what it does, I mean, it's like no matter what you're dealing with, if you're dealing with a program with CFIA, we cannot say exactly, farmers cannot say, and I'm a farmer, I can't tell them that they have to do this. They're well-respected, science-based, with scientist organization, but they can be told things that perhaps they need to hear that can make it easier for them and easier for the agricultural sector. That's why it's so important to have everybody involved. Not that everybody's wish will be answered, but in fact, we can come up with a program that will basically work better for everybody. That's what we're trying to do as a government. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate that.
Well, on that note, we'll say on behalf of the committee, Minister McCauley, let me say thank you for being here today. Do one more thing.
I have one more thing. My deputy minister is leaving. She's leaving me. And what a great asset this No comments on that. But I want to thank her publicly so much for all the help you've been, and National Defense is very fortunate, and you'll be here for another hour, and don't forget, be kind to her. She's a great lady, her heart in the right place, and I think she deserves a hand.
Oh, thank you.
Well said, Minister, and Deputy Minister, we'll we'll be sad to miss you from this committee and your work on behalf of Canadian agriculture, but we know, as the minister mentioned, you'll be a pair of safe hands over at Defence, so good luck in your next adventure, so to speak, in the Government of Canada, and thank you for your service. I was a little bit remiss at the beginning of the meeting to recognize that we do have Michael McLeod from the Northwest Territories, a great champion for the North, who has joined us for today's committee meeting. So great to have Mr. McLeod. Colleagues, just in petit rappel.
Just a reminder, dear colleagues, thank you, Mr. Macaulay, Minister. We will suspend very briefly for a few minutes. The officials will stay here for the second panel to answer your further questions. We will suspend for a few minutes.
And of course, this is always a great opportunity to hear from our lovely civil servants. And so we have about 45 minutes. Colleagues, I have to leave you in about 10 or 15, but you'll be in the capable hands of Mr. Barlow for the rest, and we'll handle the estimates process. Yeah, generally there's no opening remarks on this panel from our civil servants. We just dive right into questions. So I'll start at 6 minutes, and I'll turn it over to the Conservative Party. Mr. Barlow, is that you? Yeah. Over to you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be splitting my time with Mr. LaHoo, but I'll put a couple of questions forward. Maybe to Ms. Beck, we did have some meetings with the Canadian Grain Commission over the last couple of weeks specifically on the overpayments. My understanding there's about $130 million that is in the account, let's say. Is that number still accurate? And if not, can you tell me what that number is? Do you have that offhand?
I'm not sure that I do, but I will have a look. It's certainly a significant amount.
Pardon me, sorry?
It's definitely a significant amount. I'm not sure if I have the exact number here with me today. Do you want to do your second question while I look?
Sure.
Presumably there was a, right?
Yeah, my understanding that Mr. David Hunt has now been appointed as the new Chief Commissioner. Has yourself or the Minister given him any direction on what to do with the overpayments that are in that account?
As a matter of fact, I have had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Hunt when I was out in Winnipeg very recently, and no, we do not give direction specifically on what to do with the funding. In fact, on the contrary, I was asking for him to take his time, review all of the files, and then let us know if we can be of assistance.
So whatever funds would be in the overpayment would still be there. They're just sitting there? There's been no... Okay. Yeah, if you could just table that with us, I guess, if you know the number. Thank you. To my questions earlier to the Minister of Agriculture on the Auditor General's report, which was quite disappointing in the fact that Agriculture Canada does not have a vision or a plan, and the Minister reiterated a number of times that it's important that we have a plan for the environment and addressing emissions reductions, but the Auditor General's report was quite clear that there is no concrete strategy within Agriculture Canada in terms of its emissions reductions. So when we are charging farmers exorbitant amounts of money on carbon taxes, and we're not even talking about the GST that's charged on top of those carbon taxes, I think a question from producers would be, well, at least show me that my financial pain is having some sort of environmental gain. But clearly the report says that Ag Canada is not measuring emissions reductions directed to the quantifying by the carbon tax. Why is that the case, and why are you not doing that?
Thank you for the opportunity to respond. We too were disappointed with the outcome of the Auditor General's report. And the Auditor General was very specific in explaining that the department does not currently have a strategy. However, we have visions, we have action plans, we have all kinds of other documents, all fully science-based, and that is how our programs are developed. On the issue of measurement, as you know, globally, there is trouble measuring specific emissions, and especially from different parts of different countries. And as a matter of fact, our scientists are in the process right now of testing various means of measurement. So with those, the actuals and predictive models, that is how we are making our predictions on what will happen. I would just, one more thing, add that the OAG made their statements about what our predictive models look like on the basis of one growing season's worth of data, which from our perspective is not sufficient.
Thank you. I'll just end with this, and I'll turn my time over to Mr. LaHoo. The frustration with this is that the government is increasing the carbon tax every year, going up again by 23% on April 1st, with no data that is showing that this is actually having any impact. In fact, emissions are going up, and you say, well, we have all these documents of visions and action plans. Well, they don't mean anything if you're not doing something with it, and it's tangible measurements that farmers can hold, see in their hands. So I guess that would be certainly the message that we're hearing, and I'll pass the rest of my time over to Mr. LaHoo.
90 seconds, s'il vous plaît, monsieur.
90 seconds, Mr. Liu. Thank you. I want to get back to the temporary foreign workers question I asked earlier. There's a possibility of significantly reducing from 20 to 10% for the processing sector. As Assistant Minister or Deputy Minister, did you hear about this issue? I have only heard about it as a concern from the industry. I haven't heard it through from my colleagues who are working for the Government of Canada. Thank you. And as a solution, I do understand that you're leaving your position soon, but can you tell your successor that they should widen the definition to include processing in primary agriculture? I think it would be important. I'm sure you understand the issue of processing versus farming. And if we reduce the possibility of processing, then we are reducing production as well. Can you pass on this message? Of course, to my successor, but also to our colleagues across the government. This will have, this is the kind of thing that has a lot of consequences across the entire industry. So that's a yes, Ms. Beck. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, your time is up. Mr. Chair, please. Just please be a little bit indulgent. I'm sorry, but it's my job to distribute the time between my colleagues.
Actually, we have 6 minutes on the Liberal side. I'm going to split with Mr. MacDonald, so let me start my clock to be fair to all colleagues to make sure I'm not stretching it too far. Ms. Beck, I want to start with you, and it's a bit of a follow-up to the question that Mr. MacDonald had. I had the privilege of having the New Zealand agricultural trade envoy, a farmer himself, in Parliament yesterday. And one of the conversations we had, because of course we saw that the New Zealand government, the Jacinda Ardern government, ran into challenges around some of the environmental policies and how they can reconcile with farmers. And I think that's part of the challenge that we're facing. As the minister highlighted, there's a lot of work that has to be done. Farmers are at the front line of that. They're doing really good work. But there's also, for trading commodities around the world, I think a bit of a moment of reflection about how do we reconcile asking domestic industries to be part of that solution, but having that accounted for in the trading system, so that countries that are choosing not to ask their domestic industry to be part of this global fight on climate change are not rewarded. Can you enlighten this committee on some of the conversations you would have with, for example, some of the members of this committee were with Undersecretary Bonney from the United States, who said the U.S. is grappling with this same issue as well. Anything you might be able to share with this committee about how we balance environmental progress, but how that might actually involve a trading system globally? We hear Europe talking about CBAM, not on agriculture yet, but I think that's a preoccupation of this committee. So I've kind of just anything along those lines.
Thank you very much, and perhaps I'll share my time with Tom Rosser, who's out west right now, in fact, meeting with stakeholders. As the minister said, extremely important that we get this right. We know that our clients abroad, clients of our products, are prepared to pay a premium for a green stamped, sustainable product. So we know that it is worth the time and effort that is required to do this. We have work in play already with different colleagues around the world. And really the part that is most important right now is getting the measurement right so that we can figure how to get credit to the farmers and make sure that they can take part in this global market. But I'll pass it over to Tom Rosser on screen.
Go ahead, Tom.
Good morning, and Mr. Chair. Excellent question, and one that we are although, as you alluded to in your preface, it's nothing formally has happened in the agricultural space globally, but people are certainly talking about this. We have seen more focused discussions in sectors like steel and aluminum. We do see a great deal of interest from agricultural associations, and there was a ministerial meeting of the World Trade Organization in Abu Dhabi earlier this year that attracted several dozen observers and representatives from the ag sector. We think there is an opportunity for Canada to make a contribution of thought leadership in terms of how to strike that balance and how to promote the continuation of trade while recognizing environmental performance. So important question, one to which, like I said, there aren't answers, but I think there is an opportunity for us to make a contribution to an active global debate. Thank you.
No, and I think I don't want to speak for the entirety of the committee, but in the position that I do hold on here, I think that's something that we would highly encourage, particularly at the departmental level amongst other comparable countries, particularly because, as has been highlighted, our Canadian products generally on a GHG standard are actually some of the best in the world, but we want to make sure, I think, when I think about major exporting commodities, that whether or not it's a price on pollution or whether or not it's other types of environmental standards, that Canada is going to be seen and ranked high in that type of context if those types of, call it tariff barriers or border adjustments are put into place. Last question I have, and I know I'm leaking into your time, Mr. McDonald, but you're a good friend, you'll let me go, is around seasonal agricultural worker programs. I know that this doesn't fall squarely, Ms. Beck, under the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, but we would know that this is a highly important issue, particularly in the horticulture sector, and you'll know that this committee has been studying the issues there. Can you enlighten or share with this committee any of the work that might be happening alongside ESDC? There is some talk of I'll say rationalizing the many different foreign worker programs that are out there. But the one thing I want to reflect to you, and ultimately you can reflect to your new incoming Deputy Minister, is the importance of the seasonal agricultural worker program and having a level of certainty for employers with whom they are responsible for as those workers come into the country. We had Minister Miller in my riding of King's Hants recently and showed the important work on housing, the transportation elements, food and groceries. Employers, certainly those who are good, and I'm not suggesting that all are good. In fact, I think we need more mechanisms for those that are bad actors in this space. But those who are good employers take great pride in making sure that their workers are taken care of when they do come to this country. And that's a reflection maybe that I can just leave with you. And if you have any comment on the role of AAFC in relation to working with the SDC to make sure that these programs are made consistent and reliable, I'll say, for the agriculture community, particularly horticulture.
Do I have 3 seconds or?
Well, I'm the chair, so we can do as much as you want, but no, we got about a minute.
To confirm, of course, we work extremely closely with ESDC, and I want to be really clear, not just here in the National Capital Region, but out across the country, everywhere where this is a challenge, which is pretty much everywhere, in fact. As you know, many boutique programs have been created over the last few years. So yes, there is a need to rationalize what makes most sense and frankly, what is most simple for employers and future employees alike. So we have seen more money go into health and welfare programs for those working in Canada. And we're very pleased with the results of the Recognized Employer Program. And there are significant consultations underway. And we are supporting others in gathering exactly what will be needed. And we're hoping for a really great outcome for the sector.
Thank you very much, Ms. Beck. Maintenant, M. Parent pour 6 minutes, et malheureusement, je dois quitter, mais...
On to Mr. Perron for 6 minutes. Unfortunately, I will have to leave, and Mr. Barlow will take leadership of the meeting. Mr. Perron. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Iacano, or Yaniro, rather, you answered part of my question earlier. There's another issue that I brought up with the health minister last night with regards to duck production and farming. There's a concentration of 80% in Quebec. There's importation of genetics. There's a blockage because there's not enough vaccination in Quebec, and we don't want to import those genetics. However, there is a reliable source of non-vaccinated ducks that we could import, but there's a blockage because the CFIA is not filling out the paperwork and is essentially not collaborating with the industry. Can you give us any details? Because production will soon be compromised. I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague from the CFIA, but the health of the Canadian consumer is our priority. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of the situation you've just described.
Be more than pleased to take this back, and if there's anything that we can do from an importation and import certification perspective, and if there's any slowdowns from CFI, I'd be happy to take those details back and work with our colleagues in the operations branch to determine where the blockage is.
OK, ben on vous fournira ça. Là. Je vais revenir au ministre aussi parce que...
I'll provide the necessary information and we'll talk to the minister again. There's an issue that comes up often here at the committee, and of course, we are, of course, aware of the Canadian consumers' health. We're not questioning any of that, but there's a question with regards to reciprocity of standards. Our producers cannot export to China, Taiwan, and Japan because the paperwork is not filled out. I thought that the government actually liked paperwork. It's quite ironic. I was very surprised to hear that. But at the same time, we are importing from Thailand, Hungary, and France duck products that don't correspond to the standards we have here. This is a very important issue that can have a long-term impact, and I hope that you will pass the message along to your successor. We talked about the temporary foreign worker issue with Mr. Liu earlier, and we also often talk about reciprocity of standards, but also paperwork. There are some contracts that are only work out for the contracts for temporary foreign workers are only good for 6 months now, and only 7% of the workers are ready to work right now. We're talking about reducing paperwork, and a year ago, a witness had given us a survey that for temporary foreign workers that reduced paperwork by 2/3. It had been submitted. We included it in our report, and it still has not been integrated. I have a lot of difficulty with this. That was just a little point I wanted to make, but I have another question for Mr. Ianniero. I met some poultry farmers this week. For the past 5 years, they've been talking about a DNA test to detect the chickens that are passing through coming through the borders that are not the right chickens. And so that ends up in the grocery stores. It seems like it's pretty easy to integrate a screening test that can be used at the border. Why aren't we doing that? Is it because we don't want to have any tension with the Americans? What's going on?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I believe you're referring to DNA testing that the University of Trent has put forward, and our understanding is it has demonstrated some merits, but requires some additional refinements prior to us being able to consider that it could be used for regulatory testing perspectives and for purposes. But we're aware of it, and for sure, if this is an additional tool that we can use to detect fraudulent and misrepresented, in this case, spent fowl that's being passed off as chicken at the border, we'll surely consider additional measures that we can put in place. But I would also indicate that we're continuing to work both with our colleagues at CBSA to put priorities on these types of shipments that's already in place, as well as working with our colleagues at the USDA on this issue.
Monsieur Iacono,
Mr. Ianniero, I hear your answer, but I feel like I've heard that many times, not necessarily through you. We have to make progress on this. I have another question. Some things seem pretty simple. There are cattle producers that want 40 instead of 36 weeks to fatten the calves imported from the United States. We are importing dairy cows, but there's regulation for calves, and we are totally okay with regulations. We know that there is science attached to it, but 4 weeks to drastically increase the profitability of our producers and farmers is a simple request to which we have not received a response. What do you have to say?
Unfortunately, I have to take that one back and determine what the status of that request is. My apologies for not having an answer for that question.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Braun. We'll table that with the committee when you have an opportunity. Now to Mr. McGregor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Beck, there was a previous exchange on some of the gaps that exist with regards to monitoring emissions with the sector, with your department, et cetera. But on the other hand, like, you do have a pretty good data indicator on soil organic matter. You can see the maps of Canada's agricultural soils. You can see the relative change over time. Certainly some regions have had a significant net increase in soil organic carbon matter. I guess the rationale for me approaching this is, because I also want to put this in the context that there's a highly anticipated Senate Agricultural Committee study into soils, which is going to be tabled in the very near future, I understand. In what ways could we use that soil carbon sequestration measurement? Because I think farmers would like more of their good work to be recognized in policy. Are there any innovative ways that the department is looking at that as a way of rewarding farmers for the good work they're doing? Are there other countries around the world that we can learn from? I know Australia's got a national soil strategy. Anything you can just add on that, please?
Thank you very much. And Tom may have more too after I've finished. What we're finding particularly difficult is the measurements across the country vary, not just by region, but by last crop, current crop, future crop, of course, the weather of that year, of that month. So that is making measurements difficult. Notwithstanding, we know that with the precision agriculture tools that are currently out there, and for instance, seeders that are measuring as they go, we have many other ways of capturing the data. And our plan is ultimately that there would be global standards, and this, of course, a conversation led by our colleagues at ECCC on what the measurements would look like and what kind of carbon credit market could be established. We would need global standards so that we're all measuring apples with apples, of course. And yes, very interested in what other colleagues are doing around the globe, because frankly, there's no single good answer on this. And if we can come together and find solutions, that would be by far the best outcome. But Tom, anything?
That was, Mr. Chair, that was a very complete answer from Deputy Beck. Maybe just a couple additional points to make. One is at the national level, in terms of national reporting, as the Deputy had alluded to in earlier remarks, there are challenges of getting more precise measurements of emissions at the national level that are sometimes, estimated based on emissions factors and modeling. There is also, as she alluded to, at the farm level, if we're going to operationalize offset systems and need to come up with efficient means of measuring and verifying carbon sequestered in soils. There's a lot of work going on there, not just in Canada, around the world, in voluntary and mandatory markets. There are systems that do this, but finding one that does it efficiently simply in a low-cost manner, and ideally, as she'd mentioned, that's accepted internationally would be a major contribution in that regard.
Thank you for that, Mr. Rosser. When the minister was making his opening statement, he did make mention of the high input costs that many farmers are going through. And I'm just wondering if you could inform the committee, how does the department sort of actively track that? Is it more at a macro level? Can you just help illuminate how you're tracking those higher input costs? And as a subsequent question, what have you, because a big topic of conversation around here is the carbon tax, but we know that the costs of the inputs themselves have gone up irrespective of any taxes on them as well. And I think, particularly in oil and gas, we have seen some stats showing a 1,000% increase in net profits from oil and gas companies, and that has coincided at the same time that farmers have seen massive increases in their fuel costs. So I'm just wondering how you keep track of all that.
We do, absolutely. Weekly basis. In fact, we're tracking all kinds of different costs. We have a strong collaboration with our colleagues at Statistics Canada, but we do our own tracking and analysis as well. You will probably have seen the results out of Statistics Canada, in fact, just yesterday, looking at some of the costs and noting that input costs in some cases have dropped in recent months and perhaps stabilizing now. I don't think we're ever going to see anything as low as what we did pre-pandemic, unfortunately. And of course, the other major input cost is labor. And this part of the conversation we were just having about temporary foreign workers and seasonal agriculture is something that we track closely as well. And another reason we want to be in regular contact with our colleagues across government so that they understand. In effect, we're advocating on behalf of the sector as well.
Thanks. And maybe just one final quick question. I'm always curious about, how we're promoting Canadian agricultural production abroad. I know that the new office in Manila opened, the $31.8 million. Can you talk a little bit about how that cost breaks down?
Yeah, happy to. We're very pleased to have been able to open the office in Manila, part of the Canadian government's Indo-Pacific strategy. So it's broader than just us, but this is Agriculture Canada's contribution. The staff there will be ultimately 9 people, 6 currently there, or 4 now, and 2 more arriving over the summer. And they will, so obviously there's a bulk of the money for the presence, but we're making sure they have big travel budgets because we want them out and about in the region, meeting prospective clients. CFIA staff will also be on the ground as part of that contingent and opening doors, lifting trade barriers for Canadian exports.
Thank you very much, Ms. Beck. Thank you, Alistair. And now to Ms. Rood for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Ms. Beck, I did ask the Minister this question earlier about whether or not the Department of Agriculture was consulted with regard to the P2 plastics ban on the timeline for implementation, considering that it's affecting produce growers. So can you comment on whether or not the department perhaps was consulted on this prior to it coming out?
So I wouldn't have been there through that consultation period. Normally, yes, and I can assure you that since that has come out and in this period right now where there is in effect a pause because of what has been happening in the courts, we are in very close contact. Frankly, I would say a daily basis, making sure that our colleagues understand what exactly the impact will be on every single part of the food supply chain, not just in Canada, but around the world, because as you have mentioned, of course, what goes on with our neighbors to the south of us will be part of the solution here.
And I think the last time you were here, I did ask you if you had consulted with the U.S., and at that point you hadn't. So can you just give us a brief overview of if you mentioned you are consulting with the U.S., and where are those consultations at right now?
So really every level. In particular, I would say with our scientists. So we have all kinds of scientific exchanges, research in particular. We're doing some really interesting work between academics as well as government scientists looking at what the alternatives are to traditional plastic, let me call it that, for some more material that we can use, either recycle or ensure is compostable. I would also note that we're consulting with industry. We're asking some of the big producers what it is that they're doing, because actually it's not the same everywhere. In Europe, there are different kinds of packaging being used that, if possible, would be good to be able to adopt here.
Excellent, thank you, and I'll cede my time to Mr. Steinley.
Thank you very much. You did talk about labor, but there's another issue with labor on the horizon for the ag sector. And the Honorable Seamus O'Regan got a letter from 32 ag producers or ag food sector groups about the upcoming pending issues around the rail strikes and also around the strike at the Guelph processing facility. I'm just wondering, have you had any consultations with the Labor Department, and have you talked about the issues at the Guelph processing facility, and are there any plans in place if this work disruption occurs in July, when it is the most important time for our agriculture sector to get their goods to market?
It is deeply worrisome, of course, and we're tracking very closely. Of course, we can't intervene directly with the railroads, with the union discussions, but yes, we are feeding pretty much daily information over to our colleagues both in Transport Canada and at Labour so that they understand what the impacts will be. We've done some pretty careful analysis, and you are quite correct, deeply consequential impacts if these strikes were to go ahead. For Cargill, if you'll permit, I'll pass that over to my colleague. For no?
Just a follow-up for yourself, Ms. Beck. What are the numbers, like per day numbers? What is the hit to the ag industry if this work stoppage occurs?
There are some variables, but Tom, I don't know if you have that information with you, and otherwise we could share with you later.
I certainly, in the case of the strike at the meat processing facility, we track it in terms of heads of animals that get processed at that facility on a daily basis, but not in dollar terms. We certainly are, as the deputy alluded to, actively analyzing the potential impacts. a rail stoppage. I'm not sure that we would be able to provide a precise dollar value, but we can certainly share some of the analysis that we've undertaken in that regard.
Thank you. And
just in relation to Cargill, we're obviously in Guelph, we're in discussions with management. Obviously, it will require them to cease slaughtering runs and schedules, and we will relocate our staff to other facilities, but it would require them to obviously move those animals to other processing plants. But we've been in discussions with them and are planning.
thank you. Final question. The Minister of Ag admitted he had no idea that the capital gains increases was in budget 2024. Did anyone in the Ag department know that this change was coming and how it was going to devastate the ability for farm families to transfer the farms to the next generation?
The way the budget process works is we send proposals in, and then discussions happen about our proposals. We don't have conversations about anything else that might be under discussion.
Are you saying you don't think capital gains would have affected the ag sector?
I'm saying it would not have been the kind of proposal that we would have made.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We'll now move to Mr. Lewis and Ms. Taylor-Roy are going to split their time. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Lewis.
Actually, I believe
Ms. Taylor-Roy, you're going to go
first. Going to start.
My fault. Yeah.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I am splitting my time with Mr. Lewis. So, and thank you to the officials. I just wanted to follow up on the question of the future of the farms and the transfer to the next generation. And it's not just for farm families that have farms right now, but it's also for young people who want to get into farming. And perhaps their parents or other generations do not have farms currently. And it's been a real challenge. And likewise, some of the farmers, the newer farmers that I've met at farmers markets in my area, especially the smaller organic or sustainable farms, they're struggling. They're struggling right now, and getting farmland, especially in Ontario, is very difficult. So I'm wondering, has the department looked at all at how we can help young people and to both grow, sustain, and then enter this market in any way? Yeah, and I'm thinking in particular about the new National School Food Program as well, which could be a nice link, and whether there's been any conversations between the departments about how we might support local agriculture while having, healthy, sustainable food for our school children.
A range of questions there. I'll try. We have a significant number of programs that do support young and indeed diverse farmers coming into the community. This is extremely important for the future of the sector. In fact, in pretty much every single one of our programs, we have an extra oversight to ensure that if the applicant, the successful applicant, does fall into one of these categories, they may be eligible for extra funding. So there's sort of a built-in reinforcement for these kinds of applicants. And as well, we were talking earlier about Farm Credit Canada. They have some very specific programs as well for new entrants and for young entrants into the farming business to make sure that they have an extra hand up, as it were, in these programs. For a National School Food Program and our corresponding local infrastructure food program, and indeed, I would point to some of our other funding under agri-competitiveness. So agriculture in the classroom, for instance, very similar goals as to how we can raise awareness in youth in Canada of the, and maybe create some excitement about work in the agricultural sector, because these days it is such a diverse range of opportunities. You can be a data scientist and be a farmer at the same time.
Thank you very much, and I'll cede the rest of my time to Mr. Lewis.
Great. Thank you. I would send this message out to anyone here. Talk about supply management and the vital role it plays about the availability of fresh, local, and high quality food for dairy, poultry, and egg products. We're talking about stability in our supply chain, quality and safety of products for Canadian consumers, and fair returns for our hardworking farmers. So supply management is going to benefit consumers, farmers, and processors. And with 62 chicken farms in my riding in Kitchener-Conestoga, I had conversations on the Hill this week and with some of the farmers in the last few weeks. Can someone explain what specific initiatives would the $507 million allocated for supply management be used for, and how those initiatives support the stability of our supply managed sector?
Mm-hmm. We do have significant funds in place to support the supply management sector and a range of different programs under that. But before I go into that, if I could just add one more thing that I find particularly admirable about supply management is that it helps cut down on food loss and waste, something that we haven't talked about yet today, but being able to plan for the amount of poultry, for instance, that we will need means that we waste far less than we might have otherwise. On our specific initiatives with the close to $500 million for supply management, a good chunk of that, $250 million à peu près, is for dairy direct payment program, 114 or so for poultry and egg on-farm investments, and we receive frequently input from producers and processors and applications to use that money, going to really good programs, for instance, that will create more efficient processing and, again, less waste there, but less waste of energy, for instance, and more up-to-date instruments, tools that will mean that in a humane fashion, of course, the poultry are processed more quickly and in a more efficient manner. So I could go on. There are lots of different programs, but we could come back to you with more detail if you like.
Well, you could go on, but your time is up, unfortunately.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Thanks, Mr. Lewis. Thanks, Ms. Taylor-Roy. Now, Ms. Serpron for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You spent quite some time saying why supply management is so advantageous, which is great, but the bill has not yet been adopted. It is at the Senate. There are some senators that don't seem very keen on passing it. And those are people that your government nominated. So maybe you can pass the message that things need to make progress. I would take any comments you have to make on that. Otherwise, the fund for local agri-food industry had some investment, and we were very happy to see that. Do you think that the amount is sufficient? Many people in our ridings who poured hours and hours and financial resources to preparing their requests, and then finally they were told, well, we have so many requests that we are changing the rules of this program during the process, and you've applied for nothing. Find that I think that's that's not great. What do you have any reactions to that? I'm very sorry that we don't have enough money this time either. We are looking into the criteria to make sure that that we can accept a high number of requests, but we don't have enough money in it. And thank you for your honest response. We don't have those often, and your response was very clear as well. First, we have to adjust the criteria so that people don't work for nothing. People have other things to do. I'd like to talk about Russian fertilizer. There's tariff on Russian fertilizer that is still there, and people say, oh yes, that money will be sent back to the producer, but we all know, and I will take advantage of the fact that you answer very clearly and directly, that there's just no way of refunding that money. We don't even know who paid for it. I saw something this week. I learned that in the aerospace sector, Russian fertilizer was approved for procurement without tariffs, and we can justify that, but we are a G7 country putting tariffs on agricultural products. Don't you think that we could put an end to that? Thank you. I was not aware of the aerospace industry. This tariff is indeed still in effect, but perhaps Tom Rosser can help me with my answer. Our clients still managed to find other sources. They weren't cheaper, but it does demonstrate that sometimes there are unexpected things that happen in Canada. We are a big exporter of fertilizer, but we can't send them to the east of the country.
He knows more than I do.
Monsieur le Président, j'ai pas
Tom,
grand-chose à
sorry,
ajouter.
Tom, if you can keep it pretty tight. Just we're running close to time.
Sorry.
OK. Juste pour dire que je vais
Over the last 2 seasons, we found fertilizer sources that were not Russian. Yes, there were some issues in 2022, but things are all right now.
Thank you very much. Now to Mr. McGregor for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Becca, I met with some members of the Cattle Association yesterday, and there's one thing they wanted me to bring to your attention. So I'm just going off my notes here. They said that in terms of triggering disaster financial assistance, they were talking about a $2 million cap on gross, or I think they were talking about the cap on gross margins, not net, and that there were some bureaucratic hurdles. For example, if you had more than 2 partners, you couldn't access the finances. But so they said they had raised these concerns with AAFC a couple of years ago, but haven't gotten a response from the department. Are you able to fill me in on some of their concerns?
I'm sorry, I wouldn't have details on that. What I can assure you, though, that we have regular contacts with the Canadian Cattle Association, and they would have had responses and discussions throughout. I'm sure we're not at a solution. And in any case, I believe that if these are falling under our Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, we need to have a solution that works for the partners in the provinces and territories as well. So it wouldn't be unilateral.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for your appearance today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGregor. Thank you very much to our witnesses. We have a little bit of committee business we have to resolve before we are adjourned for the day, but I will excuse our witnesses. Thank you very much for being here and sharing your insights with us. We'll maybe give them a minute to sneak out, get some barbecue outside. Okay, colleagues, we're just going to approve the estimates to be, I'll table them in the House tomorrow, but I'm just hoping to get unanimous consent to move them all together rather than separately. I don't believe that would be a problem. Sorry, Eve. Just unanimous consent to approve the estimates. Is everybody okay with that? Rather than go through them one by one? Okay. Yeah, just, we're good. Okay. Yes, we're all good. Thank you. Yeah. All right, colleagues. Shall vote 1 under the Canadian Dairy Commission, vote 1 under Canadian Grain Commission, and votes 1, 5, and 10 under Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food referred to the committee on Thursday, February 29th, 2004, less the amounts voted in the interim supply carry. On division? On division. Shall I report the main estimates 2004-2025, less the amounts voted in the interim supply to the House? On division? Okay, perfect. There. Good job, team. I will table that virtually tomorrow since our esteemed chair has other things he's got to do, apparently. You better not be golfing. I'll be upset. Yeah, that's right. Thanks, everybody. Anything else I need? Meeting adjourned.